morning and welcome to Rose Red Homestead. Before we get started today, I just want to make one short announcement. One of our YouTube family homesteaders had some really sad news. Heather from Needy Homestead, and that's K-N-E-A-D-Y, like you need bread. And I don't know her. I think I've watched maybe one or two of her videos. But she and her family, she and her husband and her two small children, went out for Valentine's dinner last month. And on the way home, they were struck head-on by a driver in a pickup truck. And the husband was killed, and the rest of the three are injured, but they are okay. There has been a GoFundMe page set up for them. And even though we don't know them, we have made a contribution, because what a devastating event that is. And the husband was the major breadwinner of the family, and even though they have met their goal, I think that they have way underestimated how much money they're going to need to get things restarted. So I know several of our own subscribers have mentioned this to me and have mentioned that they have also made contributions. So if you are in a mind to do that, I know that they could use every single penny that could be contributed. I will put the link to the GoFundMe page right below the video. Okay, now for today's video. 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks ago, we made a video on is oven canning of dry food safe? And of course, during that video, we learned that it was not. Some of the things that I said in that video were that we live here in the desert, we have very few problems with bugs, and so I said that we don't usually do a whole lot to disinfect the dry foods before we put them up, even for long term. I had a lot of response to that from people who live in other parts of the country. And I should have remembered, I lived in Houston. My first husband, I put him through dental school, and then we came back for him to be a professor at that dental school for 3 years, and we had a house full of little kids, and we did a lot of food storage then in Houston, which is very hot, very humid. And I remember the things that we had to do. And so I thought maybe today I should come back and do a video on how to do long-term storage of food regardless of where you live. The second verse of that is that Jim and I had a bag of rice that we bought at Costco, 25 pounds of rice, that we just had in our pantry here for, probably 2 years. Even while I was making that other video and saying we hardly ever had any trouble with bugs getting into our food. Well, after that video, I thought, I better go check on that rice, and maybe we do need to do something with it. Maybe should put it in the freezer and put it into smaller cans. We opened it up. It was full of weevils, full of weevils. And so that was another motivating factor. It ended up out in the trash. I wasn't going to try to salvage it at all. It wasn't that expensive in the first place. So today we're going to learn 2 very safe methods of storing food long term, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Set up a little station here, and I have a Mylar bag, and these are food grade plastic bags, plastic buckets, 5-gallon buckets with gamma lids, and the gamma lid has a sealing gasket in this little groove right here. And so these are especially designed for long-term storage, and so these are the buckets and the lids that we're going to be using today. Now, when my first husband and I were doing food storage when our children were really young and we lived in Houston, we got together with a number of other young couples about our age from our church, and we would order bulk orders of things like wheat and all kinds of beans and rice And then when the truck came and delivered all of our goods, we'd have it delivered to somebody's front yard. And we'd all go over there with our buckets, unload the truck and divvy out the stuff. And then we would start processing them. Now, there was no such thing as Mylar in those days. I was just thinking the other day that, you know, I marvel that my grandparents were born in 1900, and that was before the Wright brothers even took their first flight. So they were born before aviation ever took off, pun intended. And so my grandchildren can say about me, boy, Grandma was born before cell phones. Can you believe that? Well, not only that, but before computers and before Mylar. So now we have Mylar. But the way that we used to do it back then was that we would just dump, and there weren't not food grade buckets. We didn't have a lot of plastics back then. And so we did use buckets, but we would dump our wheat in these buckets, and sometimes they were bigger than 5-gallon buckets. We would take little cloth pads and put liquid insecticide on those cloth pads, and this insecticide was considered safe for food back then. And then we would just put that saturated pad inside the bucket on top of the wheat and then put the lid on, and then it was good for 30 years. And I used that wheat for years and years. That is no longer considered safe, so don't do that. There are two basic ways that are considered safe to do long-term storage of dry foods: beans, rice, lentils, grains like wheat and rye. And so I'm going to show you both of those ways. The first is to use these Mylar bags. Now, I bought a package, and I've never used Mylar for long-term storage. So this is my first time doing Mylar, but I wanted to show it to you, so I needed to learn it myself. So I bought a pack of 10 5-gallon Mylar bags, and it came with this pack of oxygen absorbers. These are the 2000 size. You use 200 for quarts and 500 for 2 quarts, and the literature, the research is all over the place. It depends on whether or not you are reading someone who is selling these or someone like a state extension office who has impartial views. But the range of how much oxygen absorber you need for 5 gallons ranges from 500 cc's to 2,000. And so 2,000 came with this package, and I think as set up for 10 5-gallon buckets was $25. The buckets themselves were $4 and the lids were $2. So it adds up. And I think that there is also a better way, and the way that I prefer, and we'll show you that one second. But in this bucket, we have wheat, and it's filled to the top with wheat inside this Mylar bag. Now, the trick is that we now have to seal this Mylar bag. We have to put an oxygen absorber in here, and then we have to seal it. Now, this sealer is the best sealer that I have ever had. There's a little one that comes with my little vacuum sealer. It's not anywhere near big enough that can do a Mylar bag like this. This is an impulse sealer. It came with our freeze dryer. It's the best thing I've ever seen in my life for sealing Mylar. And so this is what we're going to use. Now, first of all, I need to cut open this package of oxygen absorbers. Now, the little button here is pink, which means they're still good on the inside. The minute I cut this open, they're going to start absorbing oxygen. So I'm only going to use one here, and then I'm going to put the rest in this quart jar, put the lid on really fast, and then we'll probably go off camera and vacuum seal it before we're done. So, give me just a minute to get these in this jar. And there are 10 of them. We'll be using another one here in just a minute, so I'm not quite going to vacuum seal it yet. But I'm going to put this lid on really, really tight. And I'm going to take this one, this is the size, and I'm just going to drop it right down in there where it can start doing its thing now. So, the question is, how do we this is heavy. I can barely lift one of these. Jim helped me get this all set up this morning. So how do we seal this? It doesn't reach. So we were figuring it out, and this impulse sealer, you just plug it in. It does not have to warm up. As soon as you push the thing down, there's a red light, which you'll see in a minute when I flip it to the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it in, and then we're going to put it right on top of the bucket and slide it to where it's still pretty steady, and I can slip this under here, make it very smooth. And then I'm going to seal half of it. All right, it says it's done. Let's check it from the other side. All right, it looks pretty good. I'm going to double seal this. So I can't go any farther this way, so I'm going to come up a little bit this way. And seal it in a second place. The light goes off when they say it's done. Okay. All right, that looks really good. Now I'm going to flip this around, and this time you'll get to see the red light, which is right here, when I do this other side. And all I have to do is just intersect somehow with this other seal, and we'll be good.
It is off.
All right, this is all sealed now. The oxygen absorber is doing its work. And we're going to get one of those gamma lids, and we'll fasten this down. Now, the oxygen absorber is going to take care of the bubble there. And so pretty soon this is all going to be flat. So I will write on the top of this, I'm going to go get a hammer. There we go. Okay, it is still a little bit up on this side. I got out all of the air out of that I could, but I'll try to do a better job next time. But once all that oxygen gets absorbed, it will go flat, and then I'll be able to put the lid down flat. Now, here's what happens on the inside with the oxygen absorber. The biggest enemy to food storage, long-term food storage of dry goods, is oxygen gets in there and allows bugs to grow and reproduce. Almost all, I'm going to say all, of the little critters that get into our dried foods require oxygen. And so if we remove the oxygen, what are we going to kill? Well, we will kill any adults. We will kill any larva. What we will not kill is the pupa or the eggs. However, the research from state extension offices says that if it is held for 12 days this way, then ultimately everything gets killed. There is some literature out there that says, oh, if you do this, you have to check it every few years and redo it. And you can certainly do that if you want to. It probably is not necessary. I use the other way that I'm going to show you, and I don't ever reopen those, and I've never had troubles. That doesn't mean I won't, because I'm learning from experience. So we're going to set this aside, and then I'm going to show you one from start to finish. I'm going to start this one from scratch. So here is an empty bucket. Now I have sanitized these on the inside, also the lid. And here is my Mylar bag. So I'm just going to fit this in the bucket. Expand it as much as possible. And this time I'm going to do this rice. This is our replacement bag for the one that had all the weevils in it. So I'm just going to open it up. I'm not going to bother with those strings, they drive me nuts. Okay, now this this was supposed to come inside a plastic bag, but they missed the bag. And so it's just loose mostly inside this bag. So here you go, you can see this. See, here's the plastic bag clear over on the side, and then the rice is just loose in here. And it looks good. I don't see any evidence of weevils at all. So I think we're good. Okay, so I'm just going to dump this in. Okay, so that was 20 pounds of rice to retrieve that plastic bag that they missed completely. All right, we can take a look. Here's the top of the bucket right here. So we still have some room in here. And I'm pushing this down. So I have some other rice that I'm going to be putting on the top of this to fill up this bucket. Okay. So now we have a full bucket of rice. No evidence of any life, anything in there. Okay, so try to get more air out of this. This time, I'm going to turn this so that it is parallel to the impulse sealer. And we're going to drop in our oxygen absorber. That was already starting to suck that lid in. Okay, now I've tried to get out more of the oxygen there so that this bag will lie flat on the top. And since I have it facing this direction, I'll just do it this direction first. So this is my second time doing it. I think I'll be a little bit better at it. I still have air in here. Well, I suppose if I did about 10 of them in a row, I would get better at not leaving quite so much air in there. I don't know if this one is going to seal until after that oxygen absorber has done some of its work. Well, we'll see. Thank you. It's not going to. So we'll put this aside for several hours and let it seal, and then we'll write on it. The second method is my very favorite because it is so quick and it is so effective. But you do need, with dry ice, you need to know some safety rules. Dry ice is frozen carbon dioxide. It is what makes carbonated beverages. When I was little, we used to use dry ice all the time to make root beer. And you probably have seen it. Frozen carbon dioxide, dry ice is, you don't want to bring it in contact with your skin because it will instantly freeze dry your skin and it's like frostbite. So don't let it touch your skin. And I'm just going to use these little gloves, and you can get away with using gloves because it won't touch my skin, but you cannot cradle it very long if you use gloves this thin. The reason I'm using these gloves is because I am dealing with food today and I don't want to use my gardening gloves or any other gloves that are dirty, so I'm just going to use these. Now I've handled dry ice a whole lot, and you just need to remember that it is giving off a gas, and so you do not want to put it immediately into a closed jar and put the lid on. It will explode the glass, and I have actually seen that happen. and it was quite dangerous. It was when I was in the 6th grade, and one little boy ended up with an injury that was awful. Okay, so here is this dry ice. And so I want to demonstrate to you what it does and why it works. So I'm just going to put some regular water in this jar. And then I'm going to just whack off a piece and drop that right down in there. Now, notice when the carbon dioxide comes up, what does it do immediately? It falls down and it rolls along wherever it's going to go. Why does it do that? Because it is heavier than air. Now remember, we're wanting to get rid of the oxygen in our grain barrels, in our food barrels. What better way would there be than to put a piece of dry ice down at the bottom of the barrel, let it sublimate like this. Because it's going to be enclosed in a bucket, it's not going to sweep away every place. Instead, it will fill the bucket with carbon dioxide and it will displace the oxygen. Is that cool or what? And so that's what we're going to do. So this is how you do a carbonated beverage. We would get, as a child, a root beer extract, 5 pounds of sugar, 5 gallons of water, 5 pounds of dry ice. I still remember that recipe. And we let it sit in there until that root beer was carbonated, and it was one of the biggest treats we ever had as children. Now, if you are living in an area like, for instance, Houston, that is very humid. Here's a caution. One of the things that you need to pay attention to. The humidity, the moisture in the air will condense on top of this super cold and it will build ice, it will build frost crystals. Frost crystals are water. And so be sure before you put it in your grain that you don't have any frost crystals at all. Okay, now all we need to go into our grain bucket. Oh well, my floor will not be hurt. There we go. I want to smash it about like this so it will sublimate pretty quickly. And we need only about 4 ounces to go in a 5-gallon bag. So I'm going to turn my little scale on right here. And I'm just going to put until we get about 4 ounces. That's 5 ounces. That'll be fine. All right, so then what do we do? Well, so I'm going to be doing these barrels of wheat right here. Now, there's a little story behind this. My son, who works all over the country, and he comes home, and this is kind of his home base when he can be in town for a couple of weeks between another assignment where he goes out. And so just at the beginning of COVID last year, he decided he wanted to participate in some of our food storage endeavors. And so he bought 100 pounds of winter red wheat. And we put it, this is the only thing we had, we just put it in these, I think these are Home Depot barrels. And it's been fine for a year, it's just been sitting in there. But I'm going to move it into these now food grade barrels. I'm going to put that dry ice in on the top of it so that the carbon dioxide will replace the oxygen. And I'll show you how we're going to do that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit of grain in the bottom. I want a couple of inches of grain in the bottom here. Okay, so here's about 2 inches of grain. And now while Jim has the camera right here, I'm just going to throw this dry ice right in there, just like that. Now, some people will put this on a paper towel. I don't. I just put it right there, and because there was no frost on it, there's not going to be any condensation. So make sure you clear the frost off of that first. And then I'm just going to fill it up. Notice no Mylar bag. Don't need a Mylar bag here. Oh. So we got almost all of it. I'm going to put just a little bit more. Now that dry ice is going to sublimate. What I do not want to do right now is to put this lid on really tight because it will blow the lid. So what we want to do is to let it sublimate for an hour, and then we'll come in and then I'll put the lid down tight. But then we don't want to leave it like that. We want to come back and check it about every hour to be sure the bucket is not bulging or the lid is not bulging. If it is, then we need to burp it to let some of that carbon dioxide out. So what happens on the inside of this one is that same thing. It displaces all of the oxygen so the bugs can't live. And if that carbon dioxide stays in place for 12 days, it will cycle through several different life cycles of those bugs. If they're eggs, they'll hatch and they'll hatch into an atmosphere of carbon dioxide and they can't possibly survive. So after 12 days, we know that we're okay. Ultimately, neither the oxygen absorbers or the dry ice method will prevent oxygen from seeping back in through the plastic and through the Mylar for 30 years. Oxygen is going to get back in there, and it's okay at that point because there's nothing left in there that will reproduce. One of the things that when we think about long-term storage is we want to be sure that the grains and the beans are still viable in case we want to sprout and grow them. Now that's another reason why you don't ever want to do oven canning of dry foods, is because once they go through that oven process, heating even up to as low as 100 degrees, 130 degrees kills the viability. And I know that because I just recently did an experiment to show that very thing. So we'll come back in about an hour or so and I've got this lid askew just a little bit, so some of that, once it builds up all the way out, then it will bubble out over the top, then we'll put the lid on. So we'll check it in again in about an hour. This one has been sublimating for an hour. Now one thing is you will never see the carbon dioxide coming out like we did on that jar. You just won't, not when you put in so little in such a big barrel like this. So you just give it enough time. And I'm not going to take this lid off, but what I am going to do now is to set this lid in place. And you can tell when this is in place because the edge is no longer flaring out. This means that it's seated very well against that gasket up inside there. Now, I'm going to be watching this for another hour or two to be sure that I don't need to burp it. If I do need to burp it, I'll just burp it. We also had enough dry ice to do 3 more. And these are the other 2 that we did on camera. The red winter wheat and the basmati rice on the bottom. Those are both with the Mylar and the oxygen absorbers. So today we have done a total of about 200 pounds of wheat and about 40 pounds of rice. So that's pretty good for one session. And I hope this was meaningful to you, and we will see you next time with our next video. Thanks for watching.